Hi everybody, TJ Mac Vintage Cards here, and today I'm doing what I think is going to be a fun video. I enjoy putting this together where I'm going to talk about my favorite summer. But the first thing I want to talk about is just what the connection is between those who collected even as far back as the 30s, but I would say more so in the 50s, and to those that collected in the late 80s. So whether you collected in the 50s here, and I got some 55 Bowman cards just to show off. These are cards I picked up when I was a really little kid. My dad took me to a card show, and they had these cards here, and I picked them out of a box just because I thought they looked really cool. And it's of course the 55 Bowman TV set issue. And you know, my dad collected 59 tops, I do know that, and he would buy them at a place called Mario's. It was just like a delicatessen, just like a 7-Eleven type convenience store that's still around to this day, that started back in the 1930s. So he would have bought these 59 tops cards from that year. Just a few examples of them here. And it would be the same if you even collected in the 60s. Here's some just different cards from 69 tops, which this is a set I built, and these are some extras from that set. Just showing those off. It's a year that I really like for collecting. Has a lot of the transition from the players coming up into the 70s and those that were retiring from the 50s. So the last Mantle card, of course, and the first Reggie Jackson card. So just a few examples here. And then even if you collected into the 70s, it was the same as if you collected in the 50s back then. You'd go to the local stores and pick up your packs in the candy aisle or wherever you'd get them and just rip them and just see what you got. You didn't really care about the centering, if in this example in this Ron Say, or if corners got a little beat up and edges. You're just kind of looking for your favorites or some of the stars from that day. And just some different examples of some 74s here. And even when you got into the 80s, and this is where I'm going with this video today, 87 tops, the cards were pretty much the same. They're made of the cardboard just like they were back in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s. So we were still pretty much collecting exactly the same. Where I lived in 1987, they didn't have any card stores. I still bought my packs at the local convenience store. For that summer, it was 7-Eleven. And the 7-Eleven I went to is still in existence today. Doesn't look like it did then. This is more what it looks like in this picture here. This looks like it's from the later 70s, but the stores pretty much still look like that. It had your neighborhood store on the front of it, and we would go in and we'd buy our packs of cards. And I just remember as a kid, my mom would give me my allowance every week. I was 12 years old in the summer of '87. Didn't have a job yet until the fall. I got my first paper route. And it was in between like video games and, I was starting to like girls and all that kind of stuff, but it was more just a summer where I had my 10-speed bike that I got that year for my birthday, and I would ride that all over town. It was really my first summer of independence where my parents didn't care if I rode my bike 10, 15 blocks over, things like that. It was a different time back then than it is today, of course. And one of the things that we would do is we'd ride over, my friends and I, to this church right here, and we'd have a bucket of tennis balls, and we used to hit baseballs over the top of this church. And next to it here, you can see over in this part over here, there was a field, and in the wintertime we'd play football on the field right by this church. And there were no windows on the side of the church, so we didn't have to worry about breaking windows or anything like that. But the church had a really high roof on it, and we would just hit tennis balls and play home run derby, see who could hit the most over the roof. It was just a lot of fun, and there was an alley behind it, and then we'd collect all the tennis balls from the alley, put them back in the bucket, and just continue to do them again. Now the funny thing is, this is a church I actually got married at about, I got married in 1998, so it was 11 years later. So I was married, and my wife actually went to this church. I never went to this church until after we got married. So it's got some nice connection for me as part of that childhood. But what was really cool is when you didn't have a job or anything like that, you just got up in the morning, you rode your bike, and I'd get my money, and I would drive over to 7-Eleven, and then I'd get my my nachos in a big gulp with some of my allowance. And they had a cool cheese dispenser there. You just push your cheese, as much cheese as you wanted on your nachos. So I would just flood the nachos with cheese, and I'd actually let them sit in there until the chips got soft. It's one of the things that I like to do. And then I got the big gulp, or sometimes I'd get a Slurpee. If I didn't get nachos, I'd get a chili dog. Just different things. My mom would give me money to get lunch, usually like once a week there. And then also with my allowance, stores back then used to have video games in them. Some of you probably remember that. And that summer they had a game called Gunsmoke. And you can see the title of it there. And what we used to do is we'd line our quarters up right on the top of the machine up there, so you could show that you're playing next. And this is what the game looked like. It was like a game, it was called Commando. It was a similar game, like a World War II type, soldier game, but this was the cowboy version of that. So we used to play that as a kid. And that would be there usually for most of the summer. They'd keep the same video game in the store. So we'd do that, and then we'd go down, of course, and get our packs of cards. And 87 Topps, this is where I got it at, 40 cents a pack. And I usually get probably 5 or 6 packs a week, maybe more sometimes, depending on how much money I had, or if my parents were generous that week and gave me a little bit extra, I would do that and go out and get those cards. And it was just really a great summer for me that year. Just really the last one that I had of independence fully, and then I got a job at 14, working at a bakery and things like that. So it was really never quite the same as that summer of 1987. And from a card standpoint, what was really cool is when I opened cards back then, they didn't have card stores. I never really paid much attention to price guides. I just liked the players that I liked. And I used to watch This Week in Baseball and read the newspaper on Sundays when they print the statistics. And I would just follow the game that way by reading the paper every day and then seeing the full statistics on Sunday and watching the news and just different things like that. We didn't have Sports Center back in 87. So that's really how I learned the game, and reading magazines. And that's how I learned about the players. I didn't really open packs thinking, I'm going to be a card investor or anything like that, because we didn't look at it that way back in 1987. The first year that it really changed for me was 88, when all the card stores started popping up, and then you started ripping packs and you're looking for the rookies, and then I was buying the magazines from Beckett and all of that back then. So what I thought it would be kind of fun to do is I do top 30 sets from every year, where I pick the 30 key cards. And what I wanted to do for 1987 to make this a fun video is how would I have picked them back as a 12-year-old in 1987. So I put this together to say, okay, how different would it be? Because right now I'm building the 87 Topps 30 key cards, but instead of doing them just in the regular issue, I'm going to put a few out here, I'm doing them in the Tiffany, because the Tiffany are rare cards. So this is the Tiffany cards from that year. You can see the Ozzie Smith. And then I'm building the 30 key cards with the Tiffany, because Tiffany's, there was only like 25,000 to 30,000 of those sets printed. So they're a little more high-end, and that's really where I'm at with my collecting now. But I still save all these sets that I had as a kid, and the cards I'm showing you here are the ones that I pulled from the packs back in 1987. So what I do is I keep them in a binder like this, and it's got 87 Topps. The binder is worth far more than the set is, but the set's special to me. And then within here, they came with a checklist. These were the old MJ Roop binders. And you can see here, they had a checklist, and then the red would tell you if they're rookies. The blue, I think, told you if they're Hall of Famers, and of course that changes as more guys get in the Hall of Fame from when this was printed. But this is the kind of binder I have, and this is where I keep the complete set, is in this binder. Again, it's worth more than the set probably, but I don't really care because the set's worth a lot to me. So what's really cool about 87 is it's really dominated by these wood borders. I think it was the first since 1972 not to put the player positions on the front of the card. I like that they put the logos on the front of the card. They didn't do that in a while. They put the rookie cups on there for the first time since 1978. So what I want to do now is I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you the top 30 as it would have been as a 12-year-old kid in 1987. And I can tell you right now, I know back then is that these guys were the speedsters of the game, and I loved all three of them because I loved base running. I enjoyed it when I played Little League. I used to love to steal bases, and these were the three big guys right here back then. You had Tim Raines, Ricky Henderson, and then Vince Coleman. Cardinals were really good that year as well in 87. They went to the World Series. And he had three straight 100 stole base seasons back then. So he was a really hot player in my neighborhood anyway, amongst the kids. Because a lot of us like the base runners. And these were really three of the best that maybe ever played the game, certainly with Lou Brock and Cobb and some of the others. But these guys were great. So they would certainly have been in my case back in 1987 if I was doing that. And then over here you had the Mets coming off the World Series. Strawberry was just such a hot player. Back then when you're ripping open the packs, you wanted to get Darryl Strawberry. Certainly one of the premier players of the National League at that time. And you had Doc Gooden. And then a guy that really busted out that year was Hojo, Howard Johnson. And he was one that played for the Tigers. I never really even heard of the guy until he busted out that year and had a really good year in '87. And I know in the late '80s, he was really one of the better players in baseball. Just a really outstanding third baseman. And then there were a couple of these younger guys coming up around that time. You had Pete Incaviglia and Ruben Sierra. Incaviglia, in particular, had a really good 1986 year. Hit right around 30 home runs, I know, that year in '86. And he was a hot guy in the packs back then that you wanted to get. And then his teammate Ruben Sierra had a breakout year in '87. He had 100 RBIs that year, 100-plus RBIs, and really one of the better players in the league that season. I really thought he was, going to be a superstar player, and just never panned out that way. He kind of fell off in the early '90s, and then popped up a little bit in the mid '90s, and then you didn't hear too much of him after that. And Danny Tartabull, he wasn't on the Mariners in '87. He was on the Royals, but he was another one that had a nice year in '87. I always liked the look of this card. I liked the old Mariners uniform there, the rookie cup, and he was a guy I remember reading about in '87, having a nice breakout year. Later went on to the Yankees, and just had a solid major league career, but never lived up to that potential. Similar to this guy, this was a card that a lot of us wanted back in '87. Both of these guys, McGuire and Wally Joyner, they were the premier young first baseman coming up at that time, and McGuire certainly had a long, storied career. Joyner, like Tartabull, had a really good career, but never lived up to that billing in '86 and '87 when he had those really great seasons to start. He kind of flamed out after that some and just became really a solid player at that time, not an all-star elite level player. And then, of course, I said McGuire, and then you got next to him Jose Canseco. You had the Bash brothers. They were a big part of my teenage years, and this is really when it started in '87 with McGuire coming up, hitting the 49 home runs. Canseco building off his rookie year. And then in '88, he was the hottest thing in baseball, of course, with the 40-40 season. So just another fun pair that we always wanted to get in the packs back then. And then Will Clark really busted out in '86 as well. He just had the sweetest swing at that time. Used to love watching him when he'd pop up on This Week in Baseball. I'd follow what he was doing in the statistics. Just a phenomenal player for that time. He was another one that you thought was just going to be a Hall of Famer for sure. And turned out to have a really good career, just never lived up to that level. And the next to him, you have Eric Davis. He had those Willie Mays comparisons. He just had, again, 30 home runs. I think he had around 50 stolen bases in '87. Just a guy we thought was going to be an elite level player as well. Loved getting him out of packs back then. And he just got hit with injuries, and I know he had cancer later in his career as well, and he just never panned out either. But when you look at it from this standpoint as a 12-year-old back in 1987, and you kind of see like, wow, what we look at today as all these great players, are they going to be looked at that way 15 years from now or 20 or 30 years from now? It's a lot different. And you're going to see when I profile my '87 Topps Tiffany in a future video, there's going to be a lot of different players in there than these guys that I would have put in 1987. And then, of course, we got Roger Clemens, who would still in my collection to this day when I'm building my Tiffany group. He was just an elite pitcher, really busted out in '86 when he won the MVP and the Cy Young. And then these two guys are the hottest batting average players, just great contact hitters of their day, Wade Boggs and Tony Gwynn, of course. I always kind of think of them as hand-in-hand because they really were the two best pure hitters of the time when I was growing up, and they were always thought that by my circle of friends anyways. And then Don Mattingly, he was one of my guys that I really followed. Watched a lot of Yankees on WPIX in the 1980s, so I saw a lot of Mattingly play, and he was really amongst, again, my friend group. The guy that we all really looked up to and really liked was Donnie Baseball. And that was funny. I remember in April of '87, I had to look it up just to see if my recollection matched the reality. And that was in 1987 in Sports Illustrated. Corey Snyder and Joe Carter, they were going to be looked at as the team that was taking baseball by storm, the Cleveland Indians. and they ended up losing over 100 games that year. And Joe Carter was, he just had a great season in '86 with 200 hits, well over 100 RBIs, 30 plus home runs, and obviously had later success with the Blue Jays as well. And Corey Snyder was another hot player from that time for those Indians teams that they thought were going to be really good. Never worked out that way, and they were actually really bad in '87. So Sports Illustrated was not right on that prediction. And then, of course, Rhino Sandberg coming up with Boggs and Tony Gwynn. So I was always a Sandberg fan. It's a great card of him as well. The Twins here, this was Frank Viola really busted out in '87. I remember a lot of us were happy to pull him out of the packs because the Twins were, a good team that year. They ended up winning the World Series. I don't think they won a lot of games, though. I think they didn't even win 90 games, I want to say. But they ended up winning the World Series that year. So they were a real fun team with Puckett, Kent Herbeck, Tom Bernansky. And there's your Frank Viola card there. And then Teddy Higuera, people forget about him, but he had some nice seasons in '85, '86, and '87. He won 20 games in '86, and he was a hot player in my neighborhood that we were looking to rip out of the packs, was that guy right there. And then just going down, I cheated and put a 31st card in here, so it's not quite 30 in the case. I went one over. But Ripken and Yount, I had my really good friend was a Yount and Brett fan, so he would always get so excited when he pulled either of those out of the packs, and he would want to trade me for him if I had extras. I lived close to Canada, and George Bell he was another guy, a hot player. He was the MVP that year. And I know Dawson was the MVP in the National League, but we didn't really follow him quite as well that summer, and his card was on the Expos, even though he was on the Cubs that year, and then they put him on the Cubs in the traded set. And then we all liked Dale Murphy. Reggie Jackson was my favorite growing up, so even at that age I pulled him of his career towards the end. I was happy when I got a Reggie Jackson. And then Mike Schmidt, of course, one of the all-time greats. But we didn't really focus a lot, I remember, on Pete Rose, who was in my Tiffany 30-card build now, and Nolan Ryan and guys like that. We didn't really focus a lot on them guys because they were a little before our time. I mean, obviously they were good pitchers still in '87, but we were looking more for the guys that were at the height of their career, or some of the younger guys. Not prospecting, but like the Incavillas and the Sierras and the guys that just seemed so exciting to us because they were just starting their careers. Doc Gooden, he was so hot, like I said, at the time. Just a lot of fun memories here with this set, and I cannot look at this set and not think about being a 12-year-old kid. So what I want to ask you today, I know it's a little bit longer of a video, but what sets did you really connect with from your childhood? If you can put that in the comments below, I'd be really curious. Now, I was collecting since 1979, 1980, and I would take breaks from it and go back to it. I collected football and baseball, but this was really the year that changed it for me because, again, I was 12 years old. I really was understanding what was going on in baseball. So this was just one of those sets that ignited the fire for me, and then it took off after that, and then I went to college and stopped and came back into the hobby again. And I also want to know what you think about, like, if you're collecting, I think the Tiffany sets are a great alternative to the mass-produced cards of the late 1980s, early 1990s, because there's just such short print runs, and I know they've taken off in price some since, but when I was first starting collecting these were pretty much the same price as the base cards graded. So I really was glad that I got into them when I did. I still need one more to finish my 30 run of key cards that I put in my case that you see here. But I'm working on that still. I just need the one card left. I have all the big names, but I just need, like I said, that one last one. So just wanted to share this video today. I love to share the connections and my passion and enjoyment for cards and this great hobby. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time to share in this longer video. And again, I really would be interested in hearing the sets that you connect with that really changed it for you. And I'm just really glad I grew up in a time when I can share these connections with past collectors. Not to say it's, bad for kids today. I don't want to say that, but we had a real purity to our collecting back then. These cards were marketed towards kids. They were not marketed towards adults. And I'm glad I share that bond with others. So everybody have a great day, and thank you for watching as always.